Welcome to Tech Bugs and Rock and Roll, a weekly podcast about technology and the web and software and music and basically plugging things into other things and seeing what they can do. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been an interesting week, and I have been melting my brain doing things that I don't normally do. So lots of fun.
Sounds like fun.
It is.
So there's been a bunch of interesting things happening this week. Somebody almost took over the entire internet using a really, really cunning attack. Now, we have a problem with discussing this particular news story, which is that the name of the piece of software in question is probably called XZ to most of the people who are listening. But when you say Z in a British accent, you sound silly.
And weird.
Yes, but I never know. Like ZZ Top is clearly ZZ Top because they're an American band and that's their name, and you call people by the name that they want to be called by. But when you do 3D geometry in the United Kingdom, you talk about X, Y, and Z coordinates, even though Z coordinate has got a dick in the middle of it, which makes it a bit cumbersome to say.
But Z index is really hard to say.
But Z coordinate
Z coordinate's easier, but Z index is much easier to say than Z index.
So maybe that's the solution: is we have Z indexes or Z indices and Z coordinates. What do you? This is one of those things. Like, I've never heard anyone say the name of this package out loud. It's XZ or XZ or
I have been saying XZ because I am British and I will stick to my British guns and I will die on the hill of Z. Alongside many other hills. I'm spread very thinly over a lot of hills, but that's one of them.
I'm going to die on one of these hills, and damn it, if I'm still alive tomorrow, I'm going to find another hill and die on that.
No, so this is just another classic example of a thankless maintainer plugging away in his spare time. And probably started the project in one set of circumstances, single, young, loads of energy, up all night on speed and cocaine and whatever else, and is now in a completely different set of circumstances.
I should just point out for the benefit of viewers that Mark Randall's development style is not an approved SSADM methodology, and you should not encourage your junior developers to write software the way Mark writes his.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Although it is compatible with Prince 2. It makes Waterfall bearable. So, yes.
Prince 2, because a bunch of guys in suits looked at Prince and went, we can do better than that.
Oh, yeah, that's not complicated enough. No, this guy, he made this, it's something to do with compression.
Yes.
And it's like a libxz.
Yes.
And so it's like the left pad package effectively on NPM. It is used by a ton of stuff, including things like OpenSSH, OpenSSL, all these different things. And people are on the mailing list because this is one of those Linuxy things. So it's not a GitHub repo, it's a mailing list.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of the things that people have been saying to this guy have been published over the last week, and it's just an absolutely perfect example of the worst kind of open source entitlement and freeloading. And so he went, I can't handle this and I need somebody to help. And this other person popped up and went, oh, I'll help. I know the code base, I can help, and all this sort of thing. And so they started contributing code. And then I think they took over as like the core maintainer. And so then this is suddenly,
this is Jia Tan. So the original maintainer. And what's interesting about this, looking at the commentary around it now, is like there's this important project with one solitary maintainer, which it would terrify you if you knew how much of the internet, and therefore by extension your bank and your pension fund and your job, only stay alive because of some solitary overworked volunteer giving up their spare time. It's genuinely harrowing.
I mean, would you use Linux if it was just Linus? Probably not, right? You need multiple people on these things.
Yes, this is very true. But when you consider that what Linux did was to plug the gap that Richard Stallman had left in his open source operating system, you're like, actually, I don't know, maybe Linus on his own would have been fine. Anyway, we're getting off topic. So there's this open source project, and it's, there is a sort of fairly plausible hypothesis now that the whole thing has been an orchestrated supply chain attack.
Yeah.
Because the people who kind of jumped on the mailing list and started piling on the pressure about you're not releasing updates fast enough, it looks like a lot of them were Proton Mail accounts. And, Proton was a fantastic service, but they do have this incredible dedication to privacy and like, we will blow up our servers before we let the FBI anywhere near them kind of. And so let's put it this way. If you were a well-funded, sort of nation-state, multinational level actor wanting to really, really do some mischief, this would be a very, very effective way of doing it. Is you put someone in. So the first contribution from this person calling themselves Jia Tan was in late 2021, when they sort of quietly started contributing code to these projects. And then about a year after that, there's all this pressure on the mailing list from people going, "You're not doing this well enough. You need to maintain it better. You need more releases." At which point, somehow, I don't know whether it was an offer or an invitation or what, but this Jia Tan person gets commit access to the repositories.
Yeah.
And, once you start digging into the details of this thing, they at some point disabled a particular set of checks in a completely different open source project when running in test mode, which looked innocuous at the time, but now it's obvious that that was because this tool would have flagged the backdoor they were injecting into XZ.
Yes.
And so they disabled that, and then they waited a couple of months. And hey, Mikhail, welcome to the stream. How you doing? And then they got commit access to it. And one of the things that is going to scare a lot of people, because most people don't think about this, is that one of the ways that this backdoor was being propagated was the tarball source code that you could download to build this, which is most Linux distributions kind of bootstrap the code they then ship to their users. That wasn't the same code as you could see in the GitHub repo.
No.
And so you could read all the Git code and it would look absolutely fine. And then you download the tarball, you get something else and you build it.
Yes.
The only reason that we know about any of this is there's a guy called Andreas, I think Freund is the pronunciation.
Yep.
It's either friend with a U or Freud with an N, depending how you are. So Andreas Freund. And Andreas Freund works on Postgres for Microsoft. It's not a sort of security person. And was studying it. The post about it's really, he found this by mistake. He was doing some micro benchmarking on one afternoon, and he used this lovely word in the mailing list post. He was trying to quiesce his system. Yes. And I had to look up what quiesce meant. And quiesce means to make everything as quiet as you can. Yeah. He's like, I want to shut everything down and stop any, like, the way developers would have a batch file they'd run to stop SQL Server and stop IIS and stop everything because they want to pull now it's that.
Yep.
Just anything that's sucking up cycles. And he noticed that SSHD was using a suspicious amount of CPU.
And taking about 0.5 of a second longer than it should do, or 50 milliseconds or something.
Yep. And, being a sort of developer doing benchmarking on a forthcoming release, I'm assuming was running pre-release versions of some of these packages that weren't in the sort of core distributions yet. And found this thing. And by total coincidence, and apparently we looked at this and then went, actually last week Valgrind, which is Valgrind is like a sort of security and performance, just run things to death and see how they die, isn't it?
It's a fuzzer for finding memory errors. Specifically, it runs bits of the code over and over again and checks to see if the memory usage is growing or something like that. I vaguely remember this from Learn C the Hard Way, because in that course, Learn C the Hard Way, Valgrind is like the third thing he teaches. So it's kind of like, this is Hello World. This is Hello World formatting the current time. And now, before we do anything more complicated than that, I'm going to teach you Valgrind because it's the most important thing you can possibly learn if you're learning C.
This reminds me of Eli's comment last week about someone trying to teach the team Git by starting with explaining the SHA-1 hashing algorithm. Anyway, so total coincidence. Like, there is no kind of rigorous process. What is it? Eric Raymond's law, Raymond's observation: given enough bugs or enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow.
Yes, that's from the Cathedral and the Bazaar.
Yeah, which is it's a nice observation, and I think there's an element of truth in it. But I once added a corollary to this: given enough distractions, given enough shiny things, all eyeballs are distracted.
I mean, if you think about it, Andreas Freund added to the pool of eyeballs.
Yes.
And so in this instance, there were enough eyeballs that it is very clear that it was only a fluke.
Yes.
And it doesn't just make you think, what should we do to stop this happening in the future? It does make you wonder, has it already happened?
Is it out there?
Is it out there already? Yep. And someone's kind of gone, I got away with that.
I mean,
we need to do a full code review of the tarballs of every single Linux.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I mean, the daunting prospect in all of this is that a sufficiently crafty backdoor could just be there leaking SSH keys. And I remember when, was it Heartbleed, the OpenSSL vulnerability a few years ago?
Yes.
Popped up. And one of the really scary things about Heartbleed was people are like, well, this has actually been in the wild for a while, which means, in theory, if somebody was able to record your encrypted traffic and keep it somewhere, then they might be able to use Heartbleed to get the keys to decrypt the records they've got. And at this point, you're like, somebody between, let's say, you and like Gmail, somebody would need to have a device between your computer and Gmail servers that was capable of recording encrypted traffic, which on the one hand is unlikely, but then you're like, well, you've used the Starbucks Wi-Fi, one of the interesting social engineering factors in attacks like this. There was a big thing years ago where a lot of like intimate photographs were leaked because they set up a fake Wi-Fi hotspot at the Academy Awards. Yes. And all these kind of, A-list celebrities thought they were connecting their phones to the Wi-Fi, and some of them got hacked and a bunch of photos got stolen and leaked online. But, you imagine setting up a Wi-Fi point somewhere like the business lounge at JFK Airport, and the kind of people
any restaurant in Washington, D.C. or Westminster, or, where the politicians go for their lunches.
Yeah. And you just set it up and you just record all the traffic, just record all of it because disks are cheap, and you wait. And, one day you're like, all right, who wants like 2 years worth of SSL traffic or HTTPS traffic?
Christopher asked earlier, I need more conspiracy theories on how deep this rabbit hole goes. And I mean, just be patient, Christopher. I'm sure they are coming. But one of my favorites, I don't know if this is the thing. I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory or if it's actually true, but it's the kind of thing that sounds like a conspiracy theory. But people say that underneath Utah, there is a huge data center owned by the NSA, which has just stored all the raw encrypted traffic. And when I say all the raw encrypted traffic, I mean all the raw encrypted traffic, all of it just goes onto disks, on the basis that when IBM or Microsoft or Google or whoever deliver a quantum computer, they will be able to decrypt the entire data set.
The reason why I think that's very unlikely is that it implies that something interesting is happening in Utah. And that's just not how any of this works.
Well, no, I'll give you that.
If it was in Colorado, maybe,
Yeah.
So Mikhail's just said, I've been wondering how many backdoors there are like this in proprietary software. Now, if you read the history of all this stuff about, the old AES encryption standard and all that kind of stuff, I don't know what it's been like recently, like within the last few decades, probably since the turn of the millennium. But certainly in the sort of 80s, 90s, the National Security Agency had this thing of, we will review your code and we will certify it.
Yeah.
Which meant that they had an inside scoop. Now, the question has always been, does that mean that they had technology that was 20, 30 years in advance of the private sector that meant they could decrypt AES at a time when no one else could? Or does it just mean that they were like, you know what, we can catch the bad guys another way, and it would be a good idea if America's enemies were unable to intercept our secure business traffic for US citizens and US corporations. I honestly don't know.
And actually, in a lot of cases, and this is true with the NSA, CIA, all those guys, and MI5, MI6, and GCHQ as well, they do this process. They go, you will give us the source code to a version of Windows, and we will go over it. We will spend 2 years going over it, and just we'll fix some bugs. We'll tell you about some bugs, and then you will have what we consider to be a secure operating system. And this takes so long and is so expensive that it's prohibitive to do it for every version of Windows that's released.
Yeah.
And so they don't. They do it when there's a version that they come like, well, that would be good. We need to upgrade. It's been 10 years. I know that certainly in the 2010s, there was still a lot of government departments for their secure services were using Windows NT4.
Yeah.
Because that was the one that they'd reviewed and declared secure, and they had the source code. They bought the source code off Microsoft. They could do their own patches. But yeah, they were running Windows NT4, while the rest of us were all on Windows 7.
Yeah.
Server 2016 or whatever it was.
I mean, NT4 was a solid operating system unless you needed to plug in a webcam. and you shouldn't be doing that on secure government computers. It's not a thing.
I'm guessing that's probably not a thing, yeah.
So yeah, that's the XZ backdoor, and it looks like the entire world of Linux and secure systems kind of dodged a bullet, and either there are enough eyeballs and the system works, or we got lucky, and we have no idea how many times before we didn't get lucky.
Yes.
But yeah, and the sort of thing about that one is kind of the story ends here, like they caught it before it got out. But yeah, never a dull week in the world of information security, is there?
No, indeed.
Now, I just want to bring up something that we were going to talk about last week, and it's quite quick, and we didn't. And then we put in the description for the podcast that we had, which is something that I put in as bad software Stockholm syndrome. But actually, I've decided it should be called bad application software syndrome, so the Stockholm syndrome, so that the acronym is badass. And this is just, I was reflecting, because there are points in all of our careers where you have a piece of software that does something weird, but you've given up trying to get it fixed or fix it, and you just know about the weirdness now.
Yes.
And I my main computer here has a bunch of Samsung drives in it, because Samsung make amazing hardware. And there's a tool called Samsung Magician, which sits in the Windows system tray and tells you if your hard drives are okay and how many read-write cycles you've done and that kind of stuff. And for some utterly unfathomable reason, when there is an update available for Samsung Magician, Control W stops working. And Control W is the keystroke that I use to close browser tabs, because it closes whatever the tab you're looking at is without shutting the application. So I use it to close tabs and close windows in VS Code and that kind of thing. Okay. And last week I hit Control W and it didn't work. And without even getting annoyed, I went, oh, there must be a new version of Samsung Magician available. I clicked the system tray and it was, and I installed the update. And then I thought afterwards, that's weird. Like, not just the fact, I don't know, like what did they do? Because disabling a keystroke shortcut across an entire operating system is quite hard to do by mistake, because I've tried to do it.
Yes.
Because I tried years ago, I tried writing an application so I could plug a PC keyboard into my Mac. And when you pushed a key, it would switch to the keyboard layout corresponding to the one you just pressed. So and it surprisingly hard to do, but apparently Samsung have done it by mistake, and I have got so used to this now that when Control W doesn't close a browser tab, I just know that I need to update my hard drive software. And
hi, David.
Hello, David. Welcome.
That reminds me. So remember we were talking about the useless key that you now have on your keyboard? Yes. Right. So I was reading about the Copilot key. Which will be the useless key you have on your keyboard in about 10 years. And
you think it's going to last that long?
Copilot.
When was Cortana shipped?
Some form, I suppose, probably. Yeah. But somebody ran AutoHotkey, which will listen for what keys you're pressing, and then they press the Copilot key, and it turns out it's Shift Windows F23.
That's amazing.
And so if you, in any other piece of software, map a keyboard shortcut to Shift Windows F23, then you can use the Copilot key. And so I thought you should load up Auto Hotkey and just press your Bing key or whatever it is.
So I do actually have, this is the snippet of keyboard. And you can see, so I've got these are the three keys here above the navigation cluster. And the one in the middle there, that's the one that brings up the window that says Cortana doesn't exist. But then those four with the PlayStation buttons on them, those are F13, F14, F15, and F16.
Oh, that's quite cool.
I honestly think that they should just launch different kinds of intercept fighter aircraft. Because, you know, no, I've got the map to stuff in OBS, and it's fun. And yeah, F keys, apparently they just keep going up. Like, if you want to.
IBM, I remember actually using keyboards back in the Windows 3.1 days, which had 2 rows of F keys at the top. It kind of bulged out at the top. And also a column of additional kind of macro keys down the side that you could do stuff with. And yeah, I kind of wonder where that went.
I really wish that there was a completely modular, like something halfway between mechanical keyboards and Lego. So you can literally be like, right, I want this strip of F keys. I want this strip of F keys. I want like a split ergonomic main cluster. I want a 10 keyless layout. And I want 4 like faders on the left-hand side so I can use it to control the audio levels when I'm doing mixes and stuff. And you just buy all these bits and they bolt them together. And yeah, entrepreneurs, are you listening? This is what we need. And then,
so we are maintaining our streak of coming up with a fantastic business idea that neither of us are going to do in every episode of this podcast, which is, good going.
So actually, one of the things that I've been working on this week, which I showed you very briefly after the show last week, is I want a teleprompter. Or rather, I've bought a teleprompter. So I have the mirrored one-way glass with the camera hood and everything. I've been basically like nerd sniping myself out of actually making videos by refining the production line. And so I'll make a video like, right, what went wrong with that? I didn't get my lines right, or I forgot what I was supposed to say. All right, well, let's fix that without relying on human memory, because human memory is fallible. And I found a bunch of tools online, and there's a couple of sites out there. And then I thought, classic nerd thing, how hard can this be? Because there's a speech recognition API built into modern web browsers. You say speech recognition dot result equals some function, and then you say speech recognition dot start, and then you talk. And every, sort of 800 milliseconds, an event will fire saying, you just said these words. And it's surprisingly accurate. Like, I was genuinely blown away by how good it is. And it took me, so when we did the show last week, I'd spent about 4 hours that day, and I'd hacked together something that worked. And this is the classic nerd optimism fallacy of I built a prototype and it worked well enough for me to this thing will work. It does it, but it had rough edges. It had a bit of latency and the highlighting wasn't accurate and everything. And so I started trying to polish the prototype. I hit the point of, no, this is a mess. I need to break it out and put it into sensible classes and everything. And, it's been a lot of fun playing around with it. But now, I've got to the point of, you've got a stream of text. So you paste your script into this thing, and then you start talking, and it highlights where you've got to and automatically scrolls. So you just talk as fast as you want to talk, and it updates the script to match that. But the script has punctuation and line breaks and things in it, and the speech recognition doesn't. So you need to match text fragments by removing punctuation from the thing you're matching it against. But then to be able to highlight accurately, you need to remember what you took out so you can put it back in at exactly the right point. And it's one of those things where, to get it kind of 95% usable literally took half a day of bolt this to that and bolt this to that and scroll it when this thing happens, and boom, that's definitely not impossible. And now it's like I'm learning things about how to, in JavaScript, you can split a string on \b, which isn't a character, it's a word boundary. And so if you do that, you get a token with a word in it, and then a token with all the non-word stuff, and then a token with a word, and then which I think I did once about 20 years ago, but now I'm like, oh, that's really useful.
And if you keep the
Um,
match objects from that regex, then you can use that to find out where you are in the string.
Yep,
Because that's
exactly
the index.
that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is that, as much as on the one hand, we're giving away brilliant business ideas neither of us is ever going to do, on the other hand, this is a real business someone's already done, but I don't want to give them my money because I don't like their pricing model, so I'm going to give it away for free. Because basically, they've bolted together things that Chrome already does out of the box and tried to pretend like that's a product they can sell.
10 years from now, a state-sponsored bad actor will send you a pull request to it and then hack the BBC.
Well, I think that all the voice recognition goes to Google servers, so they don't need to. They know. Like,
I've been doing
I've
been doing voice recognition stuff this week as well, because my eldest has their A-levels coming up, and they're doing computer science. And I remember I didn't do computer science because the school I was at when I took my GCSE options didn't have computer science as an option. But then the school that I ended up at when I actually took my GCSEs, all 5 of them, was did have computer science, and so I had quite a lot of friends who were doing computer science, and some of them were struggling with it, and so I helped. And the projects, the one I remember was there was one where you could draw. This is all on the BBC Model B micro, so very 6502. 32K of RAM, I think it had 48 maybe.
By the people who went on to become ARM Holdings and are now responsible for the processor design in 8 billion installed devices.
Absolutely. But
sorry, I completely derailed you there. Drawing, right? Yes, you were drawing.
You drew an outline of something on the screen, and it would just draw the circles or the ellipses that would then make it look like a 3D thing. So sort of like a lathe extrude kind of thing.
Okay.
It was generally very basic, but because of the basicness of computers in those days, it was actually quite challenging to write.
Yeah.
So my Willow, their project is a self-contained thing with a small touch screen, and it talks French to you, and you talk French back to it, and you have a conversation with it in French. And I'm just like, and that's what I did. My GCSEs were in 89, so yeah, that's like 25 years. And we've gone for 25 years. I can make a thing that makes a 3D tomato in vector graphics to, hey, I've built a machine that can talk to you in French and understand what you're saying and say sensible things back and everything.
I'm just like, in the United States, they're like, we're going to make self-driving cars so that cab drivers are redundant. We're going to use ChatGPT so that programmers are redundant. And you're like, we're going to make the French redundant.
Yes. Yeah, we don't need the French anymore. We've got this. But
no, I'm sorry. Unless it can cook, then no way.
Well, that's true. But the thing is,
wine and cheese. Yeah.
So they've done all the development has been done on a Windows laptop using Python, and you install it as a pip package, but it's actually just this insanely complicated thing built on top of TensorFlow and Spacey and all sorts of other things called Rasa. And I think that's from Tabula Rasa, because when you get it, it hasn't been trained. And then you use Spacey to download the core language set. So you can download a Spacey French
Tabula Rasa
language
translates
set.
as like a blank slate, doesn't it?
Tabula Rasa is blank slate. And then you basically give it some YAML files and say Rasa train. And no, Joel, Willow cannot open source it, so your son can have it for his revision. Oh, for his French revision. No, actually, I will encourage them to put it up online. But yeah, they've done all the development on their Windows laptop. The actual device, this is one of those classic things where we can't ship their Windows laptop. And so the actual target is a Raspberry Pi. The original target was going to be an Arduino, but no, you cannot
Yeah.
run open
Yeah.
source language models on Arduinos. So I
So the
went, no.
recognition is happening locally here. It's not talking to the cloud. It's actually got a
The voice recognition is actually dumped out to the cloud at the moment.
okay.
We're using the speech recognizer package or speech recognition package, but you
Mhm.
can switch it for CMU Sphinx, which is an
Okay.
on-device thing. So we
Okay.
might look at doing that. But at the moment, we're using Google. But the chatbot aspect of it, the thing that works out what you've just said and then what to say next in response and what questions to ask and so forth, is running on device. But it's not meant to. There is no support for ARM64 in the Rasa pip package, and so
Mhm.
you have to build from source. And on a Raspberry Pi, that takes quite a while.
Yeah.
And at least one of the single files that it has to download as part of its build process is a gigabyte,
Yeah.
and it times out. And then when you run that command again, it doesn't go, oh, I've already got this much. It starts again. And so the same thing happens again. And so I'm kind of like looking at this and I'm thinking, well, the other problem is that Rasa requires a different version of Python from the application that Willow has written. And so, I'm thinking about this
Yeah.
problem, not really very hard, not really very long. And I just go, oh, Docker. Docker is the obvious answer to this because we can dump Rasa into a Docker container and it will
Yep.
run with all its dependencies and whatever it needs. And then
Yep.
Willow's application can run on the device because it needs to be able to access X windows and all that sort of thing. And so I go to the Docker Hub and I find Rasa/Rasa and I look and it's a multi-architecture image and the supported architectures are Linux AMD 64 and Linux ARM 64. And I'm kind of like, okay, that will work then. So I pull this 1.2 gigabytes of Docker image onto the Raspberry Pi and I try and run it and it says exec format error, error number 24.
Number 24.
Number 24.
Oh,
So you have tried to
yeah.
run a binary for a different CPU
Mm.
on this. And so Rasa's own official Docker image. So, and then I kind of went, oh, well, I wonder if that's just the wrong version of something that's got downloaded. So then I did Docker run -ti -- entry point /bin/bash. And that got an exec format error as well. And so something has gone terribly wrong here. So we can't use the official Rasa image either.
Yeah.
And I went and looked at the build file, and it is explicitly at one point downloading the Linux AMD 64 version of Bazel. So
AMD,
it's
not ARM.
never going to work on ARM.
Yeah.
So I found the instructions for getting Rasa running on a Raspberry Pi. And so we have been painstakingly going through and putting these commands one at a time into a Docker file and getting it to build. But the thing that I thought was really awesome, the thing that that made this possible and bearable, is that Docker Desktop now comes with BuildX, which is kind of like build on steroids. And BuildX supports different target architectures. And so on your Windows machine, and more specifically on my Windows machine with 64 gigs of RAM, 16 cores, and Lord knows what else going on, and a wired Ethernet connection as of a few weeks ago, I can build an ARM image and it builds quite quickly and it does all the sort of Bazel builds and GCCs and all those sorts of things quite quickly. And then I can push it to Docker Hub and then I can pull it onto the Raspberry Pi and it works. And so, yes, I will definitely be open sourcing that Docker file because essentially you can pull that Docker image and then just do a from, use Spacey to install the language pack that you need for your particular thing, and then just do Docker run and it starts the server, and you can do Docker run, mount the current directory, so you put your YAML files in there, and then do train and all this sort of thing. But yeah, I got it working, and I feel quite heroic.
Awesome.
So yeah. And given that the other thing I've been doing this week is working on a contribution to OTel Collector Contrib, which is in Go. So I've been doing Python and Linux stuff, and I've been doing Go, and that won't build on Windows either. So I'm using WSL2 and a dev container in Goland for that. So yeah, I am just way out of my comfort zone, which is why I potentially look and sound a little bit stressed.
I know that's all good fun stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, when somebody tries to have a conversation with you and your brain's just going, "Go away! It's not fair."
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
But so one of the fun things I've been working on, I am gradually sort of working on Rockstar 2.0, which is going to be a very, very serious piece of development around a very, very silly idea. And the last week, I have a little Twitch stream I do where I just play around with ideas. And so the stumbling block I've hit at the moment is there's a thing called a parsing expression grammar. And you give it a PEG file. And a PEG file is basically all of the rules, the productions. It's like a Bacchus-Nauer formal grammar. I know you know what that is, but
I know what that is.
If you don't know what it is, go and look it up. And that's Bacchus as in John Bacchus, not Bacchus as in the god of wine and hangovers. Backus. Yeah. But basically a PEG file, you say, if you see one of these, then it can be one of those or one of those. And if you see one of these, one of those. And if you see one of those, then that is this snippet of .NET code. This is a new binary node, or this is a new decimal, or this is a new something. So it's wonderful, you know. And what I cannot get to happen is I want Blazor hot reload. So when I edit the PEG file, it reloads the web browser and reruns the WebAssembly and shows me what that change to the grammar has done to the result of parsing a program. And I've got every single step of it working apart from the PEG file. I cannot figure out at what point the PEG file runs through a tool called Pegasus, which generates a C# parser for you. And if you edit the parser, then Blazor goes, oh yeah, that's fine. And it takes like a fraction of a second. It's the fastest like read eval print only on like all kinds of cool steroidy things. But yeah, I cannot figure out how to hook in. And so, you know, there is two ways to do this. One is to try and figure out why somebody else's project doesn't do what I want it to do, which is boring. The other one is to not use a parsing expression grammar. So I've started reading about how to build recursive descent parsers. And yeah, it's fun. There's this fantastic book called Crafting Interpreters.
Yes.
And yeah, it's excellent. It's so well written. And I've been going through that. And now I'm just sort of itching to have the time to play around with it.
Yes.
So
the only other thing, you know, while you're doing things that are way more complicated than they need to be, you could look at Rust, because Rust has a very good parser package.
Nope.
And then all you need to do is make sure that everything knows who owns it and whether it's been borrowed and everything else. So
Rockstar is optimized for developer happiness. The developer is me, and if it doesn't make me happy, it's not going in.
Fair enough.
That is the North Star. That is the guiding architectural principle. Because I worked on Ruby for a while, which, you know, Matt's claims is optimized for developer happiness. But I think all the developers, they were happy and then they left me to clean up the mess. every Ruby code base I've ever seen is like walking into a house that clearly had one hell of a party last night.
Yes. I've never seen a Ruby code base where they hadn't monkey patched at least one thing.
Yeah. That's a topic for another day.
Oh, that's a whole podcast by itself, that one.
So apparently you've solved the Fermi paradox.
Yes, I think I have anyway.
How have you solved this? So what is the Fermi paradox?
The Fermi paradox, named for Enrico Fermi, is essentially for the last 100 years, Earth has been a very noisy planet. We've been manipulating radio waves, and those radio waves sail off into space, as well as over the top of your house and hit your television aerial and turn into the fragrant and lovely Sophie Rayworth on the 9 o'clock news. And I saw a story about her doing marathons, and now she's back in my head. But no, Enrico Fermi said there are like 100 billion or 200 billion stars in the galaxy, and there's a lot of other galaxies as well. And also it's been around for a very long time. And so whatever the odds are against a planet being in the habitable zone and having the right chemicals, and then those combine and form proteins and amino acids and then RNA and then DNA. It must have happened. It must have happened somewhere else before it happened here. And so they should be a lot further along than we are, and they should be even noisier. And we should be able to see with our radio telescopes evidence of other civilizations at other places in the galaxy. So where is everybody? And that's what the Fermi paradox boils down to, is where is everybody? And there are lots of theories as to why this is why there is no signs of things. And some of them are just, in order to pick up the radio waves and actually make sense of them, you have to focus on such a small patch of sky that it's going to take us 10,000 years to do it. But quite a lot of them are civilizations just don't survive long enough to become that technologically advanced. And they're going to invent nuclear weapons, and they're all going to blow each other up and all this sort of thing. And so mine is a variation on that. I think you can't get to the point. The thing that's enabled the technological explosion over the last 30 years is the internet and the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And it's Tim Berners-Lee sitting in his room at CERN and going, God, there has to be an easier way to reference papers. I hate writing bibliographies. I wish I could just link. And then inventing the web. And I don't think you can reach this level of technological achievement without inventing something like the internet and the World Wide Web. And then I think that causes the end of the world. I think that it has sort of multiple effects. I think it drives populism and people like Trump and Boris Johnson and all that sort of thing. But also, before the World Wide Web came along, nobody thought the Earth was flat. And nobody had thought the Earth was flat for about 1,000 years, actually.
And they probably never did.
And they probably never did. But now, because you've got idiots who can upload videos to YouTube, case in point, us two.
Hello.
Now, anyone who wants to say anything can put it on the internet, and with a WordPress template or some sort of off-the-shelf YouTube video effects or whatever, they can make it look quite professional, even though they are patently an idiot. And so I think that the answer to the Fermi paradox is essentially idiocracy. Once you reach a certain level of technological sophistication, evolution goes into reverse, and your species will gradually become more and more stupid until it dies out. And so, yeah.
I have three different explanations for the Fermi paradox. One of them is, if anyone's read The Science of Discworld, which was a collaboration between Terry Pratchett and Ian Stewart and Jack Cohen, I think is the two professors who Ian Stewart was a mathematician at the University of Warwick, and Jack Cohen is I think an exobiologist, like he has some weird specialism. And those two, they wrote a book. They wrote a science fiction novel called Wheelers. And there is a throwaway line in Wheelers which says that the radio emissions of any sufficiently advanced society are indistinguishable from black body radiation, because everything that isn't encrypted is compressed. And so the window during which a society has the technological capability to transmit into deep space, but is still broadcasting plain text, is actually very, very brief. because it takes human beings, probably we're talking on the order of 1 or 2 centuries from we've got long distance radio to we've got digital radio, and everything is either compressed or encrypted. So all of the patterns are gone, because all the patterns that we haven't hidden, we've then exploited to reduce the amount of bandwidth we need. And so not only would you have to be pointing your radio telescope at just the right place, but you need to be doing it at just the right time between the bit where we're completely silent and the bit where it's just noise and it's indistinguishable and you can't pick any patterns out of the noise. So that's one, and I like that. It's an excellent book, by the way. It's really, really, really good. I highly recommend it.
It is.
The second one is the vanishing, like the odds of life evolving on land are significantly smaller than the odds of life evolving. Yes. Because it is a weird coincidence that planet Earth has the conditions for liquid water, but some of it isn't under it.
Yes.
And, the theories of planet formation, if you've got water, the whole planet's probably underwater, which means life will be underwater. And if you think getting enough oxygen into orbit to maintain a spacefaring civilization is a big deal, take Tsiolkovsky's rocket equation, and I'll be like, we have to take enough water. And water is heavy and does not like going into space.
Yeah.
And
yes. In 2010 or possibly 2065. No, in 2010. So the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes.
2010, they go back to Jupiter to find out what the hell happened to that spaceship we sent to Jupiter 10 years ago. And they
get there. The one that they filmed, and Helen Mirren has a Russian accent.
That's right. Yes.
Yes, I remember.
And then at the end of the book/movie, millions and millions and millions of monoliths just pour into Jupiter, increasing its mass, because Jupiter is one of those things it's a gas giant, but it's so big that if it was much bigger, it would be a failed star. Be like a brown dwarf, one of those stars that doesn't generate much heat. And so monoliths pour into it, increasing its mass until it achieves the critical mass and becomes a star. It ignites and becomes a small star. And then the moons that are going around it essentially are now planets. And then they send a message to mankind saying, all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landings there.
Yep.
So in 2065, we go back again and we land there.
2061.
Because of course we do. 2061.
Yeah. It's going to end in a 1.
And
that's kind of the thing. Yeah.
Yes. And in the same way that there's been a monolith on the moon watching over the development of humankind for 1 million years, there's been a monolith on Europa for however long it is. And there is actually an advanced sentient sapient species evolved and living at the bottom of the ocean below the ice crust on Europa, but they have no concept of outer space because they can't see it. As far as they're concerned, everything that exists ends at a wall of ice and there is nothing beyond that. Which is if you haven't read the follow-up books to 2001, I absolutely recommend them. They're some of the best classic sci-fi out there. Really, really good. Just briefly on the Terry Pratchett, you mentioned the science of Discworld.
Yes.
Do you put the x-clax-overhead response header in any of your websites?
I haven't for a while, but I used to.
Yes, because I remembered to put it into Fretbadger. And so if people don't know, people might know Terry Pratchett but not know about this. So the guy who invented the clacks in the Discworld books had a son, and his son died. And so in memoriam, he added a sequence of on-off binary digits to the Clacks message header, the thing that was sent with every message that said, this message is going to contain this many characters and that sort of stuff. And he put his son's name in there just as a way of remembering him. And it was just to pad out the length of the thing to a set number of things. And so a bunch of people online adopted this and went, well, we're going to do that after Terry Pratchett sadly passed away. We're going to remember him forever by adding a header x-clacks-overhead with the value GNU Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
And so
I'm looking at the headers on the biggest site that I ever worked on, where we added that to it on the day that he died. And it's not there anymore because the company has been acquired by people with no soul or imagination, which is inevitable. It happens.
But it is, I think Reddit has it.
Yeah, it's in a lot of places.
It's in a lot of places. So yeah, it's
Clacks was a real thing. Clacks was not an invention. They actually had semaphore towers the size of windmills in France before the invention of the telegraph.
Oh,
and they were, yeah.
There was something about that that was like gave Napoleon an advantage or something.
It features in various, sort of political and military strategies, and it was also used in fraud. Because in the days when commodities broking meant literally taking a wagon full of stuff from Paris to Lyon, a pair of brothers who operated one of the semaphore towers would change the messages they received and send false stock market prices. And it's like so much stuff in Pratchett. His whole thing about Ankh-Morpork being built on the ruins of Ankh-Morpork is what Seattle did when it kept flooding, and they're like, let's just put the pavements one story up and get on with it. Yeah. It's Pratchett was a wonderful kind of creator and fantasist, but he also he knew so much about the weird, wonderful quirks of the world that we live in. So
I mean, any city that's old enough has another city underneath it.
Yeah.
If you ever get the chance to go into the Edinburgh that's underneath Edinburgh,
I have.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the smell. It's just, it smells of history.
Yes.
And stuff. But yeah. So we're sort of running up against it, and there's one thing that I've got in this list here that I really want you to tell me about, and that is Visual Basic for applications, but in German.
So this cropped up on a Twitter thread that I was looking at. And so Visual Basic, Microsoft's basic dialect that let you design dialog boxes, massively successful and influential. And there's a couple of dialects of it. So there's VB, full Visual Basic, and now there's VB.NET. But there used to be Visual Basic, and then there was VB Script, which was an interpreted lightweight version. And then there was VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, which was the macro programming language built into Microsoft Office.
Yes.
And in Office 95, the version of VBA that shipped with like localized versions of Office was a localized version of VB. So if you were writing Excel macros in VBA in German, you would have to write function with a K instead of function with a C. And keywords like do and while and when and these kind of things, they were German. They weren't English.
Yes.
And so they localized the whole thing, including the error messages. But of course, nobody, like if you were trying to find out what had gone wrong, nobody else knew about the error messages. So all of the like early online internet forums, you had to translate your error message back into English to be able to look anything up.
Yeah.
And actually, I've done occasional bits of work over the years for companies where the code base is in, because most programming languages are based on English.
Yeah.
If they have keywords for things like if and else and while and do, those are English words. This is just sort of a convention we've got. But I've worked on systems where all the verbs are English, but all the nouns are in German or Danish or something, because the developers were bilingual. And so they use the domain knowledge, the domain language that they're working in to name all of their classes and their methods, but they call them using English keywords. Yeah. And that bakes my noodle. Like I after a while, you'd think it would be something you could figure out as you went along, but no. We have a visitor. We got a special guest on the podcast today.
Who's that?
This is Mac.
Hey,
say
Mac.
hello to the internet, Mac.
Are you cat sitting?
Mac is visiting because I live very near the vet, and we try
Right.
not to use the car. So when Mac goes to the vet, Mac stays at my house the night before, so it's easier to get him there in the day.
For those who are watching with their ears, Mac is
Mac
a
is a cat.
gorgeous white and ginger cat of considerable size.
He's chunk. Yeah,
He is chonk.
he's chunk, and he's got one part-time brain cell.
Also, I just need to read out this chat message from Origami Marie. There are old death records in Seattle where the cause of death is something like stepped from the road to the sidewalk from the time when the roads had been raised, but the shops were one story down.
Oh wow,
That's awesome.
Yeah, they built, basically they took the main carriageway and they jacked that up.
Yes.
And so there was a period when the cars were above your head. If you were walking along the pavement, you were walking in a sort of narrow canyon between the road and the shops. And then eventually they kind of cranked everything else. I'd love to visit just to kind of see that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I need to wrap up in 5 minutes because I'm going to the City.js speaker dinner with a guitar and a PA system to entertain them with songs of daring do. And then tomorrow I'm going to be at City.js, which is taking place in London. And I think tickets for that are still available. And I'm just going to remind myself where it is because I should. It's at the Royal Geographic Society. I knew it was at a Royal something somewhere. So yeah, City.js London 2024. It's all kind of JavaScript, folks talking about Node.js and React and front end and web APIs. Going to be some fantastic speakers there. I have done a bunch of stuff with them in the past, so this time I'm literally going along just to watch. Aris, the organizer, pinged me and said, "Hey, do you want a free ticket to come along?" And I don't get to go to conferences very often where I'm not on the hook. Now, this either means I get to go along and enjoy the day, or it means that I'm going to get there and at some point someone's going to go, "Do you have a talk? Because one of our speakers didn't make it."
Yeah.
Which, yes, I often get invited to conferences I'm not scheduled to speak at, and often I'm somebody's ace in the hole in case there's a problem because they know I've got
dead
stuff.
in the eye and say, "No, I don't have any talks."
But I do. I do. If you need me to show you how to build a ray tracer in JavaScript, I can be good to go in 5 minutes, and they all know that. So,
in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be joining this podcast from Paris, where I will be. I'm delivering a keynote and a talk at Devox in
nice.
Paris, which is going to be fun. Nice few days away.
So I'm on Sunday going to Copenhagen to do the program committee for the Copenhagen Developer Festival, which is for those of you who've not seen the format, you get 8 people in a room, you give them 1,200 talks and tell them they're allowed to keep 50.
Yes.
And it is a very important part of the process, and it's going to be 2 very, very long days. And then on Tuesday night, we're doing a free meetup. So if you're in Copenhagen and you want to come along, we're going to be I'm going to be talking about AI and machine learning and how to make sense of what is happening to the idea of being a developer. We got a bunch of lightning talks with food and drinks and stuff. So yeah, you want to come along, look that up, NDC or Copenhagen Developer Festival meetup, and come along to that.
Yay. Okay. Well, I want to make it an hour.
Yeah.
So one last thing. Laser pointers
are illegal in Switzerland. Now, this is one of those things. It's been true for a while, apparently. I looked it up. And 2019, they changed the law in Switzerland to make laser pointers illegal, other than... if there's like a class 1, I think, and it has to have like an official sticker on it that the Swiss authorities recognize. But anything that's class 2, class 5, class M, class whatever, or unlabeled is properly illegal. And I stumbled across an interview with somebody who the PowerPoint clicker fell out of their bag as they were going through airport customs, and they ended up in a holding cell while the police interviewed them about why they were trying to smuggle illegal contraband into Switzerland.
See, that's an overreaction. I mean, take it off him, sure.
Yeah,
that's one thing. But it's kind of sorry, you're not allowed this in Switzerland.
Yeah,
not are you a terrorist attempting to bring down the very fabric of our independent nation?
This being the country where every male over the age of 16 has a submachine gun.
Yes.
So there's only so much you can do with a laser pointer, you know.
Yes.
But no, this is just one. I mean, there's a bunch of weird things. So the other thing I found out this week that I like I put this on the list, and Mark said, "I can't believe you didn't know that." Was about Microsoft having a new font.
Yes.
Which is actually lovely. It's called Aptos.
Aptos.
And so Aptos was going to be called Biergart, which means beer town. And apparently they said you can't, the default font in Microsoft Office is not going to be called Beer Town. Call it something
Microsoft
else.
don't like cool names for things. They rename them just at the last minute.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, Aptos, that's the new font that's in Microsoft Office.
Yes.
And
it is very nice.
Pretty much wraps it up.
Yeah.
It's nice. Oh, it's a good font.
Yes.
Right, that's it for this week, folks. If anyone's going to be at CityJS tomorrow in London, come and say hello. If anyone's going to be in Copenhagen next Tuesday, come and say hello. If anyone's going to be in Paris,
Paris the week after that, give me a shout.
And then
even if you're not at Devox, I can meet up with you for whatever you do in Paris, whatever you drink, I suppose.
What else are we doing? There's a London.NET meetup on the 11th of April, Thursday. We got Alex Shepherd-Godwin talking about what it's like writing code when you've got blurry eyesight. And Maria Assumpto Koefu talking about building fake websites to test people's cybersecurity awareness. And then there's all kinds of things happening. There's NDC Oslo and Copenhagen Developer Festival and Build Stuff. And the second half of the year always gets exciting. So
yes. And Federico in the chat says, thank you for sharing your knowledge, which is an incredibly sweet thing to say. Thank you, Federico. It's that's a nice take on it. We're just pair of idiots talking on the internet, but I'm glad people are enjoying it. We'll be doing it at the same time next week, 4 o'clock UK time, and
we promise to not to radicalize anybody. We're just here to talk about stuff we think is fun. So.
Yeah, that's it. So take care of yourselves, and we'll catch up with you again next week.
Bye-bye.